Hello and welcome to On the Record, a debate-style television talk show where Bahamians will find the balanced, true and open debate you've been looking for. When Dame Doris Johnson became the first woman to contest a seat in an election and went on to become the first female president of the Senate, few back then would have imagined that women would one day ascend to so many political high offices. An elected member of the House of Assembly, government ministers, a deputy prime minister and even governors general. We have seen women stand shoulder to shoulder with their counterparts, save one position, prime minister. When Loretta Butler Turner seized power as opposition leader in Parliament, for the first time the possibility became a reality. Even though years earlier, during an illness by then Prime Minister Perry Christie, Cynthia Mother Pratt stood as acting Prime Minister for months. But last weekend, a very significant step towards a female Prime Minister was made when Arinthia Komolafe became the leader of the Democratic National Alliance, DNA. And tonight, she is my guest. Our topic tonight, on course with the DNA, Arinthia Komolafe charts the way forward. It's all on the record. I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. Our discussion begins on the other side of this break.
On the Record is brought to you by Alive, the nation's newest and best LTE network.
Good to be alive.
I'm Dr. Nigel Lewis. I'm the proprietor of Universal Dental. Well, I prefer the consistency that Alive brings to the table. I like the fact that you get a call, I get a call, whenever something seems to be going haywire. And when that starts to happen, I know that I'm going to get a phone call to say, hey, listen, we know that something is happening. It's going to be done in an hour. An hour later, we're up and running. Everybody knows that when the time comes, you need to have your friends be able to make contact with you. And I like the little jingle that comes on when they put you on hold. I know it sounds inconsequential, but you know, it's some of these little things that really would make a difference.
Are you afraid to swipe your card and you don't like to carry cash? If so, you need checks. Executive Printers can make checks for all your needs. They have laser checks, personal checks, continuous checks, and more. All checks have up to 15 security features, so you know you'll be protected. You can even customize your checks. Come and see one of our experts today, or log on to epbahamas.com for more info.
Arinthia Komolafe was elected as leader of the Democratic National Alliance on February 22nd, having served as deputy leader previously. Her career in politics is the latest plank in the building of a successful career. Her career spans law, banking, policy making and corporate administration. A nationalist to the core, Mrs. Komolafe is a weekly columnist for the Nassau Guardian and has espoused policies and solutions in diverse essays relating to issues affecting the Bahamian people and the nation at large. The party's website describes her as a disciplined and organized Bahamian professional with a proven track record of achieving results and driving positive change. I'm pleased to welcome to On the Record once again Arinthia Komolafe, but this time as leader of the DNA and the first woman in the Bahamas to be elected as the leader of a political party. I am so happy to have you here tonight. First of all, congratulations on your election. How do you feel? What was it like for you?
It was actually very overwhelming.
Really?
It was a wonderful feeling. It was after months, it was the culmination of months of work within the party, but for me it was a culmination of years of work. And it really is just the beginning, but it was truly an overwhelming experience.
You ever doubted at any point that you would ascend to the position of leader in the party?
Never did.
Never
did.
Let me back up. When you entered politics and you joined the DNA, did you espouse to be leader then? Did you?
I did not.
You did?
I did not. Actually, I did not even know that I would join the DNA. A lot of things happened in my life over the last 3 to 4 years, and it just moved very swiftly. Now, I had always known that politics was going to be my destiny in life. I never knew, though, that I would have to switch political parties, that I would join the Democratic National Alliance, that I would ascend to the deputy leadership and then eventually the leadership. But as I was inside the organization, it became patently clear where my destiny was.
Interesting. It's always hard to be the first of anything because there's always this push to set the standard, so to speak. But do you feel a lot of pressure in the position?
Not quite, you know, and I think a lot of that goes to what I've known personally for years. I mean, it's being manifested now, but I've known that this was the path for many, many years. And internally, behind the scenes, I fought with my maker, you know, because I knew that God was calling me into this direction. So for many years I fought. I said I didn't want to take this path because I really wanted to be on the path of business. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I wanted to create many jobs. I never really thought about politics, but the country was always calling me. I always carried the country in my heart. And so once I dealt with that with God, once I came to terms and I said, okay, I'm going to subject myself to this process, it became that much more easier for me. So the pressure is not there. I don't feel the pressure. And internally too, and in privately, I prayed to the Lord. I said, well, I know you've called me to this, but just give me the wisdom to know how to lead this people.
Interesting, and a good path to follow and to be obedient. What has been the response? Politics is a boys' club. Particularly in the Bahamas, we've had women who have ascended to great positions, but it's still primarily a boys' club.
It is primarily a boys' club, and that's because I've spoken to several women's groups, and the question comes all the time, why aren't there more women in politics? And it's because women themselves don't see themselves in politics, because while we've had a lot of great examples over the years of women in politics here in the Bahamas, it's not a first career of choice, because it is rigorous. You know, you have to be out there on the front line. There is going to be a lot of scrutiny. Persons just typically they tend to scrutinize women more than they do men, you know, but it is a boys' club. And so the response has been overwhelmingly good. And I'm actually very humbled by the response. Of course, there are still a few who say, well, you know, women in leadership, women at the head, I don't know if I can get with that. But I've seen some persons actually over the past several months who may not have been pro-female leadership who have come along. They've moved away from looking at the gender itself and focusing on what is this person saying, what does this person bring to the table? Could I subject myself to this individual? Because we've been saying time and time again, competency is not limited to gender. You know, gender does not determine your competency. And so there is because it's a boys' club and persons are used to it, there's a lot of conversation going on and there's a lot of excitement in the air. And then there are some persons who feel, you know, some other way about it.
One of the things that I get from women a lot of times in politics is that they are not respected around the decision-making table. It's as if, you know, we give these women a token position. You run, you get a seat, you may even get into the cabinet or however it runs. But when it comes to sitting around the decision-making table, a lot of times women feel like their voices aren't heard, they aren't taken seriously. But it's a little different now. You are at the helm calling the shots.
Yes, yes. And you know, you have to know who you are. You know, you have to have an understanding of who you are, philosophically speaking, ideologically speaking, because then you are able to stand on your principles and what you believe in. And it is at that point, if you're not respected around the table, then you know, okay, well, I'm not welcome here. But if you are consistent with your message and you're consistent with who you are, and you show that you're not unwavering, you know, you're between two different ideologies, then that makes it a bit more difficult, particularly as a female, because you are a rarity in the game. And so if you are a rarity in the game, you have to work that extra harder. You have to be that extra sure of yourself. And that is how you, little by little, gain the respect among your peers, male or female.
One of the criticisms that you will hear is that women are sometimes emotional and will lead by emotion. I've asked this question on previous shows, and I'm always surprised sometimes by the answers that I get. But, you know, men will say, oh, you know, women, they're emotional creatures, they lead by emotion.
Well, human beings are emotional creatures, right? We've just in society told men, well, you can't act in a particular way because if you act in a particular way, you may be less than a man. But that's not necessarily the case. Women, of course, we feel, and we're not afraid to show our feelings, but that's not something to remove you from the process for leadership. I've said time and time again, women are in leadership in all sectors of society in this country, right? Nobody speaks to their emotionalism at that point. Women are, for the most part, leading our schools. They're leading the healthcare sector, and they're all throughout the public sector. They're just not sat in that very top spot as the CEO of the country. But there's nothing wrong with showing some emotion, but the reality is, though, that we have to, as women, demonstrate that we are not as emotional as persons say that, that we are, right? Because you don't want that hanging over your head. These are things that you have hanging over your head. Well, perhaps you can't take the job on because you're too emotional. Mm-hmm. And we have proven time and time again, I mean, we've had some very good, strong women in politics. Right? We have had Loretta Butler Turner, we have had Glenys Hannah Matten. These are women of passion. You know, you've seen them. You have Janet Bostwick, these women who have stood up, or Rome Italia Johnson. These are good examples of strong women who have been in politics, and nobody speaks to their emotionalism. People always speak to their passion, they speak to their competency and what they have done, and how they have led and blazed the trails for women like myself, who are now coming behind them in the shadows, you know.
Is the Bahamas ready for a woman prime minister?
I think the Bahamas is ready for competent leadership. I've always said to persons, the gender is irrelevant, right? It is a big topic now because it seems to be a novel concept to us because we have not yet achieved this gain. But the Bahamas is not that behind countries like Turks and Caicos and Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago and Bermuda and Dominica that have already taken this step. The Bahamas is ready for competent leadership. Where we find ourselves in our nation today, in our society today, the fact that we see ourselves regressing on all levels, from an economic standpoint, from an education standpoint, the fact that we're losing our competitive edge in the region and globally, particularly in our #2 industries, one has to sit back and ask themselves, where are we and where is it that we want to be? It has very little to do with our gender. In fact, it has nothing to do with gender. It has more to do with competency, visionary leadership, leadership that understands that this is the time to govern in the best interest of the Bahamian people, in the best interest of the masses. Has nothing, very little to do with gender.
So I'm going to ask you now, what is it that drove you to join the DNA?
Well, where I was at the point, I just felt that the ideologies and the philosophy of the institution at the time did not align with what I was interested in, or where I feel that we needed to go, and the vision that I felt we should have for this nation. As you mentioned earlier, I used to write a column in the Nassau Guardian, and I did so for 5 years consecutively. And I wrote about socioeconomic issues, and I wrote about political issues. And when I had the opportunity, actually I was introduced to Mr. McCartney by a husband and wife team, Max and Erica Curry, who called me, and I said to them, I think I've made up my mind which ticket I'm going to run on in 2017. And they said to me, well, you haven't sat down with Mr. McCartney yet.
So you were planning to run on the PLP ticket?
No, I
No.
wasn't. At that point,
Okay.
I wasn't planning to run. I had already withdraw
Okay.
my request for a nomination. But I read the policies before I went to the meeting. I read the policies and the platform of the Democratic National Alliance, and they closely aligned to a lot of the views that I was espousing in the columns that I wrote over the years. And so for me, it was a natural fit, philosophically speaking and ideologically speaking. It was a natural fit. In addition to that, it's a new vehicle that is not entrenched with all of the legacy issues that the other two parties are burdened with and are laden with. And I felt this was a good opportunity for me to go and help and build something, to start something fresh, to bring something new, because I knew at that point that my generation specifically was looking for something different and was looking for something more. We had been under the governance of these two institutions for the last several decades, really. And they've been back and forth, as a Bahamian people, back and forth between these two organizations. Clearly there's something missing, and clearly there was something that we wanted. And I wanted to be a part, and actually that's one of my strengths. I like to take something, take it from nothing, and take it to somewhere.
Well, that's very scary for a lot of people, because it's a different kind of work when you're building.
That's correct.
You know, from the ground up. And I'm always curious as to, you know, how, when you decide to break with a political party or move in a different direction, you know, what kind of conversations do you have with your family, and you know, what's dinner like now?
Boy, it wasn't easy.
You know,
it wasn't easy.
You've come from a predominantly PLP family, correct?
Yes.
So you know, when you decided to make that break, and even now, you have ascended to the leader of this party.
Yes, yes. It wasn't easy in the beginning because I was at the time a third generation PLP. The PLP was all that I knew.
Wow.
And my mother was very staunch in the Progressive Liberal Party, and who was very much on the ground for years as a general with many, many members of parliament and would-be members of parliament. She didn't take it too well in the beginning, and she was a bit concerned because, of course, that was another world. You had your family life, you had your church life, and you had the PLP. You know, that's the way life was structured. But as I explained to her, and she and my father know, and she and my father have known for many years, that once I make up my mind about something, I would have taken the time, I would have thought the process through, and I would have made a careful decision and said, okay, I think I'm done with that and I'm ready to move on. And so they respected my decision for what it was that I had to do, even though if they didn't fully agree with it. But as I explained to both of them, your generation did what you had to do for your time. It is now my time to do what I have to do for my generation. And in my spirit, I'm feeling I cannot stay here. And if I stay here, I'm going to be very frustrated within. And I cannot be frustrated because I have a contribution that I have to make. And so I have to go somewhere where I feel at ease and where I feel comfortable. And eventually, they started to respect that decision that I made. And as a matter of fact, they're coming along even more now as the process progresses.
I am sure they must be immensely proud of what you've been able to achieve.
Definitely.
Good, and you know, it's always, family support is always very, very important. And sometimes people, you know, as a family, even if you don't agree, but support.
Yes,
you know.
correct.
Just before we go to the break, you have a demanding career as it is. I mean, at the very beginning, I spoke about some of your accomplishments. You have a family, and now you have this huge political. You have this political party and this political life now. How are you planning to balance all of those things? You know, I always say that for men it's a little different because we don't always have the burden of running a household, dealing with children as a wife and a mother would.
Yes.
But how are you planning to balance all of them? And I presume you have to continue along with your career as well.
Well, yes, but the good thing is I have a very supportive husband who has been very supportive of my ventures and my pursuits in politics. As a matter of fact, even before we got married, he knew that this was the path that I had to take.
And he still married you?
Yes, he did, right? And so we already mentally knew where this was going to go. From a mother's standpoint, from a mothering standpoint, my children, very interestingly enough, they're so vested in this whole process.
Really?
And this is one of the reasons to why I'm involved in the process, because I look at the future that awaits them. Is it a good one? Or is it going to be one that's going to be as good as the one I had in the Bahamas? Or is it going to be worse? And every day they constantly want to be involved in the process. They want to be there. They want to attend DNA meetings. They want to join the DNA. But I've tried as best as I can to keep the separation. But they've been very supportive in the matter. They're very mature children, even for their age, you know, and I still do get to balance to spend quite a bit of time with them. I'm a soccer mom, so I'm constantly on the soccer field with them. From a career standpoint, though, I've had to sacrifice significantly. I could not pursue any 9-to-5 work, even in terms of my practice. I'm very selective with the work that I take, nothing that is going to be too overbearing, because I've given myself over to this career in politics. And so I have really substantially reduced my time in my professional career, and that was necessary because I had to create the balance with family and with the politics. And I preferred to, God had it so that I had the ability to do that, that I can make a sacrifice on the professional side in order to pursue these other pursuits.
Well, certainly I know it's going to be a very interesting one for you over the next few months and years. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more On the Record right after this.
Matt, where in the world is Matt Lauer? Where in the world is Ellison Greenslade? And so these about to know while you were concentrating in Atlanta. So we can talk about it.
More On the Record tonight. The government's purchase of the Grand Lukine is a hot subject in the news. We're going to...
Hi, I'm here to tell you about the fastest way to purchase the vehicle you want right from home.
With SBT Japan, we import used cars from Japan straight to you.
Car ownership doesn't have to be hard. Go to sbtjapan.com and sign up for free. Search for the car you want, place your order, and make a payment using any one of our convenient payment options. Once you pay the duty and tax to our in-house broker, we will clear the vehicle and even deliver it straight to your home. Sounds too easy? Well, shouldn't it be?
This portion of On the Record is brought to you by Generali Insurance Company Limited, your employee benefit specialist.
Welcome back. Tonight we're talking to Arinthia Komolafe, newly elected leader of the DNA. She's a product of the public school system, received her tertiary education at the College of the Bahamas, the American Intercontinental University in London, and the University of Buckingham. Called to the bar of England and Wales and the Bahamas in 2003, she is well accomplished in her career. I'm happy and proud to say that this is your first sit-down interview.
This is, yes.
And so we're very happy to have that honor.
It's a privilege.
And thank you, but what struck me, and I think we talked about it a little at the beginning of the show, is I did not notice a lot of media coverage about the election and about your win and how significant this is. I mean, to be the first woman to be elected to run a political party.
Yes. I've gotten that report back as well from a lot of persons. And I think if one were watching the landscape over the last several months, particularly in the aftermath of the general elections, you will see that there's a sentiment out there that the DNA should not exist. There have been editorials, really, that have been committed to saying that the DNA should wind up, that it's a waste of time for a third party to be pursuing governance in this country at this point in time, because the Bahamian people are more fixated on a two-party system. Of course, we have a different mindset and we have a different belief. We believe clearly from the trend that we've been seeing over the past several general elections that the Bahamian people are looking for something. They've not been voting in governments, but they've been voting out governments. And the sad reality is that they've only had two options that they have had to choose from for the most part. And so we believe, of course, from a constitutional standpoint, where persons really should have the right to associate with whomever they want to, that there is an opening for the Democratic National Alliance. There should be a platform. We do have a voice. We do speak for a sector of the Bahamian society, and that our voices should be heard. And we believe as well that we speak very intelligently to the issues that are pressing or that are confronting the nation today. You know, when we put out a press statement, it's not just an opposition press statement opposing what's transpiring in the government of today. And when I say government, I mean, the sitting administration as well as the official opposition, but we also provide solutions and guidelines as to how the government can direct itself in the best interest of the Bahamian people.
You feel the media is treating you unfairly?
Well, we have gotten some coverage, so I wouldn't go to that extent and say they've been treating us unfairly, but I do believe that there is a strong sentiment that the DNA should not be present at this current time.
The party has come through, and much to what people have said, the party has come through 2 elections, not even having won a seat in either election. What's different this time around? What do you think could possibly draw people to you this time around? Or what are you hoping?
I think with everything, things take time. It's not going to be an overnight solution. You know, it took the Progressive Liberal Party more than 10 years after their formation, before they ascended to office, right? It was a little bit shorter for them to get seats. I think they got seats 3 years later in 1956. It took the Free National Movement 20 years to get to government. I think in this day and time where the people are so much more educated, they're so much more enlightened about what they want and the things that they feel should be happening, that you have to prove yourself, really. And because of the type of governance that we have been getting, there's a trust deficit between the people and politicians. The DNA will be celebrating 8 years this year in May. I remember when I was on the ground last year, some person said, okay, you all made it through 1 general election. This will be a second one. If you're around by the 3rd one, then I'll give you a try. I'll give you an opportunity.
3rd time's the charm.
3rd time's the charm. So that's one of the points. But then another point is this as well. There's a new voting bloc, a young generation.
They made up the largest voting bloc
They make up
in
the largest,
election.
exactly. They are not loyal to party colors. They are not loyal to the PLP or the FNM, as we were coming up in our days, and we were just told to vote the way your parents voted. This generation today, they have a mind of their own. They make an assessment of their own. They're more observative, and they understand more. And we believe that there's an opening there. That's why we believe that this time is going to be different, because that demographic is the demographic that we target. And we let them know that we're speaking the voice. We're the voice for their generation. We know what it is that they want, because we're part of that. There are a lot of young people that are involved in the Democratic National Alliance. Even around our executive council table, there are young people. I'm a young person myself. I mean, I start off the millennial years. I was born in 1980. And I knew that when I returned home in 2003, I felt at that point that we were voting for the lesser of 2 evils. And I felt that there was more that we can be doing for our nation and our society in this day and age.
Interesting. One of the criticisms of the DNA in the past 2 elections has been the selection of candidates. And there have been individuals who said, I wanted to vote, but I just couldn't put my support behind the candidate who was in my area. Have you heard that? Are you planning to address it differently? Is that a concern for the party?
Yes, those are very valid concerns. And one thing you know about politics, perception is reality. So whether the thought that we had a poor selection of candidates in some respects is real or perceived, the reality is we take it as real, because perception is reality. So that is our first order of business, to recruit candidates that we believe that we can send into the community and that the community will be accepting of. But we want to do that at the earliest opportunity. And so fresh out of the convention gate, that's our top priority, to be able to choose our candidates, select them, and to put them in the community as early as possible. And we would like for the Bahamian people to be very engaging. And you can contact the DNA and say, well, you sent that candidate, I think I like that candidate, or you sent that candidate, we don't like that candidate. But, provide the reasons why, reasons that we can come to some conclusion and say, okay, perhaps we need to switch gears.
I didn't hear you speak about the vetting process, and that's very important in a selection of a candidate, because many individuals will present themselves as candidates and wanting to run, but have you looked at your vetting process, or are you looking at that as well?
Yes, definitely. So we're putting a team together who will be responsible for that, for carrying out background checks. But at the minimum, during the application process, of course, you're going to have to submit your identification to prove that you are Bahamian. We'll also be asking for things like character reference, bank reference, character reference, which would be personal or it could be and professional as well, police records, all of the basic information that we will be looking for to accompany your application.
Now, in the last election in 2017, the DNA actually polled less than they did the election before in 2012. Have you, as a party, looked at what would have caused that?
I think it was a combination of factors. You mentioned one earlier. It was the candidates that we would have presented. The other factor, which we think was the overwhelming factor, was the fact that the incumbent at the time, the way the Bahamian people perceived them, what we got on the ground a lot, and I got it a lot where I was campaigning as well, and I campaigned in multiple constituencies in addition to the one that I ran in Killarney, was the fact that persons did not want to take the risk of allowing the Progressive Liberal Party getting into government again. And that was largely based on the rhetoric that the Free National Movement had put out there, that a vote for the DNA was a vote for the PLP. And I think when we looked inwardly, we felt that we waited too long to address that, rhetoric, which seemed to have caught fire on the ground, because we got a lot of that on the ground. And so really it was largely because persons did not want to take the risk with voting for the DNA, with the chances that the Progressive Liberal Party would return to office.
Interesting. You mentioned it earlier in one of your responses, the fact that this country is primarily a two-party system when it comes to politics. And I think you alluded to it a little bit earlier, but what will be your strategy now to change that mindset? Because it is my experience, and having worked several elections, that people will talk about, oh, I'm tired of the two, or I want something new. And then 6 months out, you see, a change, and people sort of begin to make up their minds within that window of time. What are you going to do differently now to begin to even change that mindset? And I mean, we've had the conversation before, but to really change that mindset so that translates into real votes.
Yes. Well, a part of the strategy is to get out the gate early. And that is why we're glad we came out of this convention now. We have to go back to basics. A good game is a good ground game. That's how you're going to win. And we're going to knock on doors. And that's not just the physical ground, going from door to door and knocking on doors. You mentioned earlier about media. The reality is, in today's world, you have so much diverse media that you can use now to reach the persons you have to reach.
Millennials don't watch TV.
They don't watch TV. They don't read papers, right?
Yeah.
They get their news and their information from Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp. And those are the avenues that the DNA are going to be using to be able to reach that demographic that we want. But we have to court the Bahamian people. As I mentioned earlier, there's a trust deficit between the voting population and politicians. We have to court those individuals very early, which means we have to be on the ground very early, and you have to get to know who's Arinthia Komolafe, who's Bushame Ambrister, the deputy leader, who's Omar Smith, the national chairman. Who are these candidates that we're going to be presenting to the Bahamian people? Who are these people who are interviewing to lead us in the next general election? And so it sounds very simple, but it's as simple as that. Literally just knocking on the doors and presenting ourselves to the Bahamian people and presenting our plans and our platform.
Campaign financing is one of those fundamental assets in an election. Knowing that your party was challenged with keeping pace with the other parties in previous elections, what is your strategy this time around?
Well, we would like for this current administration to present campaign finance reform laws and have that in place for the next general election. But understanding the modus operandi of this current administration, we're not putting a lot of hopes on that. But we believe that if we have a good message and if we have a good team, we believe that the money will follow the message. Apart from that fact, we're also carrying out a very effective grassroots campaign. We just put on a convention, and that convention is debt-free. That was from the work we did last year in raising funds, in getting donations, and just carrying out our own grassroots funding mechanisms to be able to fund that convention. And that, to us, we were very proud of that, because we come out of that convention, like I said, debt-free. We will continue to do that. carry out our grassroots campaigns, and you will see actually coming forth very soon some initiatives that the party will be using to raise funds.
Certainly we'll be looking forward to that. As we get ready to go to the break, this is a question that I want to sort of revisit in another kind of way. Women have always come close to but never really run a political party. Deputy leader is as close as they've gotten up to now. Are you concerned, though, that you may not get the proper cooperation and respect from men within the party, as well as even your political opponents?
Yeah.
Because a lot of times your opponents can be very dismissive. You know, are you concerned that that may happen?
Yes. Well, on the point of the women leading the political party, I think they make it clear that it's major political party, because then Ali McIntosh, who has been heading the Bahamas Constitution Party,
yes.
I think they've had that conversation going on out there as well. But to answer your question about getting the respect, I can say to you, and there are so many men who are involved and active in the Democratic National Alliance at the leadership level, at the executive council level. And these are men who are sure of themselves. They have no challenge with female leadership. I've gotten an equal amount of respect from them as I have gotten even from female leadership. And what you would find around the leadership table with the Democratic National Alliance is that we have a good representation of what the Bahamian society looks like, and particularly the voting population. We have men around the table, young and old. We have women around the table, young and old. And more specifically, I want to highlight the fact that we have a lot of young people that are sitting around the table as well. And so I have not had a challenge with those that have been very close to leadership being able to follow female leadership.
Are you concerned that your political opponents may be a little dismissive?
Oh, certainly. Certainly, I think they would try to be dismissive, but if you ask me if I'm concerned, I'm not concerned.
You're not concerned. Good yes. position to have.
Yes.
Excellent. Arinthia Komolafe is my guest tonight on The Record. Our show continues right after this quick break. Welcome to On The Record. Looking for more On The Record? If you miss our Thursday showing at 8 p.m., join us for the re-airing on Friday mornings at 10, and then again each Sunday night at 8:30. Or go to our YouTube channel and catch up on all of our past episodes. And then like our Facebook and Instagram pages for a preview of upcoming shows and get a chance to ask your questions. Just look for On The Record.
I'm Dr. Nigel Lewis. I'm the proprietor of Universal Dental. Well, I prefer the consistency that Alive brings to the table. I like the fact that you get a call, I get a call, whenever something seems to be going haywire. And when that starts to happen, I know that I'm going to get a phone call to say, hey, listen, we know that something is happening. It's going to be done in an hour. An hour later, we're up and running. Everybody knows that when the time comes, you need to have your friends be able to make contact with you. And I like the little jingle that comes on when they put you on hold. I know it sounds inconsequential, but you know, it's some of these little things that really would make a difference.
Our topic tonight, On Course with the DNA, Arinthia Komolafe charts the way forward. I want to talk a little bit now about some current issues facing government as well as opposition, but certainly government being the predominant topic here. Government's revenue, just announced yesterday, government's revenue projection for the 2018-2019 fiscal period is now forecast to fall short by $185 million. That's according to the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, who revealed that fact as he delivered the mid-year budget yesterday in the House of Assembly. Your response?
That was very much expected. And you know, we said that to the government in the beginning when they increased the value-added tax by 60% to 12%. The DNA, we had already spoken to the fact that the economy was already strained. Persons were already finding it difficult to live from day to day. And you were seeking to extract, the government was seeking to extract an additional $400 to $500 million out of the economy. Where were they going to get it from? The person, you have an unemployment rate in double digits. It was double digits in New Providence and double digits in Grand Bahama. And nationally it was double digits. And the employment rate has not gone down under the Free National Movement, it has gone up. If persons are not working, they cannot pay their taxes, right? And so with the austerity measures that they were carrying out in laying off persons from the public sector, and then with the private sector now strained because you increased the taxes, where did the government expect the funds to come from? And we have said, and we've seen now in the aftermath of the increase of value-added tax by 60%, we've seen unemployment going up again nationally, right? The situation is not getting better. The macroeconomic indicators are becoming worse. And so everybody is looking at the Minister of Finance and saying, well, we were telling you this from several months ago. Why didn't you listen? You wanted to put us on this aggressive timeline to pay off past due bills. You wanted to put us on a timeline to pay off bills in 3 years, when you should have done it over a 5 to 7 year period or even longer until the economy got to a position of strength. And so what we see now is a worsening of the macroeconomic indicators in this country as a result of the poorly informed policies by the current administration.
Their response, though, is that they are shrinking the deficit, which is in hindsight, is an important factor to the economy.
Yeah, but it's an important factor to the detriment of whom, right? We understand that we have a very precarious fiscal position. That's through years of mismanagement by the government. But why is this administration focusing just on numbers and not on people? You have to be able to create the balance. You cannot carry out austerity measures and then at the same time reduce your provision in social services. The services in this country at all levels have gone down. From the government, from the office of the Prime Minister to every aspect of the public sector. The ease and the cost of doing business in this country for the average Bahamian has worsened. This is an administration that is focusing on numbers to the detriment of the good of the Bahamian people and the welfare of the Bahamian people. Yeah, you can say, okay, at the end of the day when I left the office, the deficit was down to X amount %, and we reduced the deficit maybe by a couple of $100 million, but at what cost? Your people are suffering. They can't find work. Your private sector can't create jobs. You won't hire them unless they are your own cronies, persons that swear allegiance to the red politics. But at what cost are you creating these wonderful numbers? But at the same time, what are we gaining? We've still come off a 5 blacklist at least. We're still at, our credit rating is still at junk bond status. At what cost are you reducing these reducing the deficit and bragging about these numbers? There are two sides to every story, and there are two sides to an equation, and you can't just focus on the one side.
I'm going to ask you from where you said, what has been, as you see it, the biggest failure of this government?
Their inability to get the economy back on track. But I think even over and above that, this is an administration that campaigns on transparency and accountability. And I believe if they remain true to that commitment, then this issue that we are addressing even at the economic level would not have been such a great issue. I mean, it's really sad to see that a lot of the things that they said that they would do, the implementation or the full implementation of the Freedom of Information Act, the fact that ministers would be held accountable in a Minnis administration, that's what Minnis said. And we see now where Minnis has gone back on his word. For me, I think that is their biggest failure, because if you can't trust the word of the person that's leading you, you know, it causes your people really to lose hope and not to be interested in your administration. I have never seen so early an administration that has lost the will of the Bahamian people. I mean, it was literally within months of office. And while opposition parties, even us as the DNA, may look at that and say that's an opening, that's a very sad reality and a sad state for us to be in. Because the failure of this administration is the consistent and constant failure of this country and the failure of our people. And our lives are not getting better under this administration. It's getting worse. So I think it's really a sad state for us to be in.
I want to talk a little bit about the corruption factor you brought up. Just recently, PLP, members of the House of Assembly and Senate, walked out of the chambers and remained out for several sessions, claiming that the government was abusing its power. This, of course, stemming from the decision of the magistrate to throw out the bribery charges against PLP Senator Frank Smith. Of course, prosecutors say they intend to appeal the decision. That has really come back to haunt this administration in many ways, and it seems to be getting worse as opposed to getting better. What's your position on all of this?
Well, I mean, it speaks to the lack of accountability. The other day, when 4 ministers stood on principle, 4 members of parliament stood on principle and said, we're not going to vote for this budget because you are increasing value-added tax by 60%. The Prime Minister did not waste his time in bringing down the hammer on those particular individuals who were standing on the side of the people. I mean, the people marched in droves to say, we do not want this increase in value-added tax. And the Prime Minister went straight and he gave them the hammer. In this particular instance, you have a magistrate who has called out 2 sitting cabinet ministers, senior cabinet ministers of the Minister administration, and spoke to how egregious their acts were. And if you recall, during opposition, the way in which the now Prime Minister, Dr. Minnis, spoke about the Christie administration and Alfred Gray's interference in the matter on the island, and how he thought that that was something that was so egregious that Alfred Gray needed to vacate office. And here he is now faced with the same situation. Persons from all quarters of society are saying that these 2 ministers should either resign or be fired. And you should remain true to your commitment to transparent and accountable governance. And that is not accountability, because those 2 ministers are still walking around and they still have all of their perks and they're still sitting in cabinet, despite the fact that what they have done was very egregious. It was a breach of the Constitution. It moved away from the principles of separation of powers, where the executive should not interfere with the judiciary. And if you see a society, if a society sees the leader of a country behaving in this manner and the government behaving in this manner, then why should persons be inclined to follow the law? You have clearly created an us and them society. It's like when your parents used to say when you were growing up older, don't do what I do.
Do as I say. Do as I say. But I have to ask you this. When you look at, even within the party itself, you know, the media reported just last evening a confrontation of sorts between Minister Marvin Daines and Frederick McAlpine, who's been very outspoken within the party. When you look at something like that, does that signal something to you?
I think what it is doing is now you see a manifestation publicly, because there has been a lot going on behind the scenes. It's now starting to boil over, right? There's a division going on there in that administration. And we saw that early on in that administration, where one minister would say something and another minister would come back and say something contradictory to what the minister had said. Now, these are all colleagues sitting around the cabinet table. They should be speaking with one voice. That's the nature of our Westminster system. And so now what you see is, I mean, I think they almost came to blows inside the House of Parliament, which is a very serious thing for us to be getting to, right? It speaks volumes about the leadership that's going on there at the government level. But I think it also speaks to the division that's going on inside the party, the division of direction, and it speaks to the different ideologies and philosophy, because clearly the backbencher is saying these 2 persons should not be sitting there. And this is a backbencher who himself was also, like I said, he was one of the 4 where the hammer came down on him. And if you're looking at that, you know, as your parent, as a child, you're looking at your parents, you say, well, why would you treat us in this particular manner when all we did was stood with the people? And here are these 2 other individuals who have, for their own personal agenda, had nothing to do with the people. It was their own personal agenda to prove what they said that they were going to do on the campaign trail, which was to lock some people up and put them in jail.
I've got to ask you this before we go to the break. The European Commission's decision to blacklist the Bahamas has been described by the Attorney General as unwarranted, prejudiced and indefensible. The PLP blamed it on incompetence. You alluded to it earlier in one of your statements. What you know, you look at this and you said, well, we put in all of these austerity measures and we've done all of these things, but yet and still we still land on these blacklists.
Yeah, because look, the ministers that are there now, they're out of debt and they don't understand this particular industry. And as a matter of fact, ministers over the years have not really been paying attention to what the industry has been saying. We missed an opportunity time and time again to rebrand the Bahamas as an international financial center. We have a very robust AML-CFT framework here in the Bahamas. We have done well to implement a lot of the requirements that have been coming out of Switzerland, Basel I, Basel II, and aspects of Basel III. We have been working tirelessly to turn this financial services industry around. But the Bahamas and our government have been operating and acting in silos. One ministry is over here doing one thing when the other ministry over here is doing the other thing. Most of the blacklisting that we are facing today is because of our tax situation and the fact that we are seen as a tax haven. And so we are a haven for persons who want to leave the European shores and to come here and to do business with us. We've said time and time again, if you are governing in the best interests of your people, and we have talked about a comprehensive review of the tax code and putting in place an equitable and progressive tax code, what these multilateral agencies are saying to the Bahamas, the EU, the FATF, the Netherlands, we've been saying to our leaders for the past several years, put in place a system that would reduce the amount of tax or eliminate the tax that are coming from these multilateral agencies and saying, well, you're creating an unlevel playing field. Could you imagine? Those bodies are saying that you are giving foreigners more preferential treatment than you are giving to your own people. Outsiders are saying that to the Bahamas. They're only saying what we've been saying for years. It goes to show you the mindset of our leaders and where they've been over the past several years.
Interesting take on that. You are watching On the Record. Our final segment with Arinthia Komolafe is up right after this break.
Hi, I'm here to tell you about the fastest way to purchase the vehicle you want right from home.
With SBT Japan, we import used cars from Japan straight to you.
Car ownership doesn't have to be hard. Go to sbtjapan.com and sign up for free. Search for the car you want, place your order, and make a payment using any one of our convenient payment options. Once you pay the duty and tax to our in-house broker, we will clear the vehicle and even deliver it straight to your home. Sounds too easy? Well, shouldn't it be?
Every time I'm in the Bahamas, I use Rev Go Play.
Got that food. It's packing. Here he comes.
Yo.
Wait, Omar coming?
Boy, this Rev Go Play, solid.
Rev, you and us together.
And we're back with more On the Record. Mrs. Komolafe has served in multiple senior positions at the party level in Bahamian politics and was instrumental in modernizing the governing structure and processes in specific arms of the party. Our topic tonight, On Course with the DNA, Arinthia Komolafe charts the way forward. When we left off at the last segment, we really got deep into some of the issues that are facing this government. And we talked about some of the snags and pitfalls, but one of the things that the government has touted has been the increase in tourist arrivals. Last year, 16.5%, which they have lauded as a success. I mean, when you look at things like that, how do what's your response? How do you now come out as an opposition force when the government says, hey, we've done great things for tourism, up by 16.5%, projected to continue to do well this year?
Well, I think they walked into a good situation, right? First of all, I think there's a hard-working team there over at the Ministry of Tourism. That's the first point, right? A good team of technocrats who have been working across administrations, bringing the success that we have in the tourism industry. Secondly, The same Bahama that was the very subject of the opposition's comments during their opposition period is what has proven to be the savior for this current administration. I mean, but for the fact for Bahama, of course, arrivals are going to be up because now you have more rooms inside your country, more rooms that are available for occupancy, and Bahama itself is doing its own marketing through whichever means that they are doing that, of course, with the assistance of the government. But that's a natural progression, right? The fact that you have more rooms, the likely result is that you're going to have an increase in arrivals.
One of the major, I guess, sore points and sticking points for the past few administrations has been and continues to be, in some respects, Grand Bahama. But in early February, the ITM Group announced a $130 million development for Grand Bahama to introduce the redevelopment of the Grand Lucayan Resort Complex, the transformation of the Grand Bahama Cruise Port into an adventure park. They are projecting some 2,500 jobs and 18,000 indirect jobs. Is that the savior for Grand Bahama? Is that going to, or should it come to fruition, put that economy back on track?
Well, I mean, Grand Bahama's issues are far more complex than that, and a few projects that are on stream. And by the way, we'd have to see those projects come to fruition,
sure,
right? Because we're used to seeing politicians make announcements, and,
they make lots of announcements,
and nothing follows from those announcements. But there's a lot of issues that is going on up there in Grand Bahama. Obviously, if the situation in New Providence is bad, you can also almost multiply that by 10 there in Grand Bahama. There are several issues that are going on there, and a lot of professionals have spoken to it, dealing with the ownership there at the port and the requirements under the Hawksbill Creek Agreement, and whether the owners have been living up to their responsibility under that agreement and being able to develop that economy and pump into that economy, making the ease of doing business and the cost of doing business much better there in Grand Bahama. I mean, the same issue we find here in New Providence and across the Bahamas actually is the same issue that we have up there in Grand Bahama. Again, also, we have to find the identity for Grand Bahama. You know, Grand Bahama was never really touted to be a tourist destination within the archipelago of islands within the Bahamas. It was supposed to be the hub for manufacturing and for industry, for the industrial sector. And really, with Grand Bahama, we were ahead of our time as a nation, even compared to the rest of the world, where you had this economic zone where you can come there in a free port area and be able to trade. And I think somewhere along the way we have lost our way on that. We have lost our track on that because we have not been able to maximize all the good that Grand Bahama has to offer. And so I think if we're really going to see a change there in Grand Bahama, I think we need to get it back to its initial intent, which was for it to be an industrial hub. And from my perspective, and it's something that I really support, because you mentioned the tourism industry earlier, and we also have the financial services sector. But I believe if we're going to create sustainable jobs, more long-lasting jobs, that we need to be looking in that area in the industrial sector, where we will have more viable job opportunities for the Bahamian people.
The OBAN deal also still appears to be on the table, even though government says that it's in the process of reviewing and submitting changes to the heads of agreement, while also doing some due diligence across the board. Should the government abandon the OBAN deal?
Of course. I mean, we have said that time and time again. I don't know why we're still talking about OBAN all of these months later. I mean, our Prime Minister, it was very embarrassing for us as a nation. He actually sat down and saw a forgery take place and admitted it in the House of Parliament. There's no reason why we should be speaking about this project. They made so many missteps on this project, from not getting an environmental impact assessment, from not revealing who the true owners are behind this particular deal, not revealing the true plan or intent behind this deal, and the fact that persons are speaking about the health concerns surrounding the OBAN deal, and the fact that we have already had a project like this before that did not turn out to be as well as they anticipated for it to be. I don't know why we're still talking about this project. I don't know why the government continues to push this project. I think they touted it as a $4 or $5 billion project, but the way the jobs were going to be created was not going to be something that was going to have such a major impact on the economy and the gross domestic product. I mean, it is a deal that stunk from the beginning, and it is really something that we should not be pursuing.
Very quickly, as we wrap up, what can we look forward to from you and the DNA over the next few months and years now?
We're going to be on the ground in the run-up to the general election, and we're moving forward to win the government. That's what we're moving forward on. We start with that basis. And what you will see is more of the DNA on the ground, as I said, knocking on doors. But what we're going to do is to take our 2017 platform, and we're going to expand that and put it in a manner where we can articulate it, that the layman can understand it. This is a step-by-step guide process to what the DNA wants to do when we lay hold of the government. In addition to that, you will also see the DNA leading from behind. You will see some bills that will be coming forward. We will be shopping around to members of Parliament in the House of Parliament who can put forward certain bills, because they have the ability to do so, who can put forward certain bills that we believe will be in the best interest of the Bahamian people. And one of those first bills you will see will be the campaign finance reform legislation.
Good to hear that. That's a very different concept, and we're looking forward to it. Arinthia Komolafe, first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
Again, from all of us here. Certainly we are, you're no stranger to this show, and so, we take a little personal pride. We see our regular guests doing something great.
Yes, thank you.
And we're excited that you, have ascended to be the first woman of a major political party. Correct myself, of a major political party to assume leadership. So we wish you all the best. We certainly will be watching. I'm sure we'll be talking to you a few more times, certainly in this platform and in others. Thank you so much again for coming on, and best of luck to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We hope that you have enjoyed our show tonight. Special thanks to the new DNA leader, Arinthia Komolafe, also my producer and technical staff. Once again, I'm your host, Jerome Sawyer. We'll see you next time right here on The Record.